Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Them white mother-effers. Which mother-effers? These mother-effers. From the Daily Wire, them white mother-effers. Racist agency framed its lawyer after he discovered lawbreaking. African Development Foundation assistant, who is black, said in a sworn affidavit that its CEO said he would not hire white people. This is a ridiculous story, and it continues the adventures of the now closed African Development Foundation, shut down because of DOGE, who had to take U.S. Marshals to go in there and get control of the building. A lot of funny things going on with the money. They had a general counsel who was white, who they framed when he questioned some of the questionable activities going on over there with respect to money and reporting their activities to the board of directors. A small USAID-like federal agency called the African Development Foundation refused to hire white people and treated white employees who did slip through so poorly that one soiled herself because she was afraid to leave her desk to use the bathroom, according to employees who told this to the Daily Wire. That's really bad, and these guys have to be held accountable. The agency violated so many rules and laws that its general counsel was flabbergasted, but when he called attention to it, officials framed him for violent threats and removed him from his job with a bizarre manifesto that called him grimy and unwholesome. That's the general counsel, Mateo Dunn, who is also white. The agency attracted attention by locking the doors to prevent auditors from the Department of Government Efficiency from seeing its books. They also sued Elon Musk to prevent a takeover. The lawsuit is pending, but all of its employees have been laid off after the Trump administration gained access to the office using U.S. Marshals. The Trump administration also cleared out the board of directors, and that is really a great way to get control of an entity. They did the same thing with the Institute for Peace. These kinds of stories are not giving me a lot of confidence that our money is well spent when we give it to nonprofit organizations, and it seems like all of this foreign development money is not going where it's supposed to go. From 2021 until February of this year, the agency was led by CEO Travis Atkins, who came to it after a short stint at USAID as a Joe Biden political appointee. Atkins' former assistant, who is black, and why should that matter? Because the accusations made by the former assistant. They said this in a sworn affidavit that, quote, on at least 3 occasions, Mr. Atkins told me that he wanted his entire team to include the general counsel, which is the head lawyer of an organization. When you're general counsel, you're the head lawyer. When you're CFO, you're the head finance person. But apparently, according to this assistant, Mr. Atkins said he wanted his entire team to consist of only black people. He wanted all of his direct reports to be black. Direct reports are the people that report directly to you, as you may imagine. That means if you're a boss, the people that you interact with are your direct reports. Usually it's your managers, or maybe it could be an assistant. Quote, he was very adamant in only hiring African Americans, mainly female, and he told me many times he would not hire a white person or a veteran. I said, that's discrimination. And he said, I'm the president and CEO. I can do what I want. According to the assistant who told this to the Daily Wire on the condition of anonymity. I wonder how hard it would be to find that assistant's name. Probably not that hard. I'm not going to do it. Leave that person alone. Atkins is also a lecturer at Georgetown University. Of course he is. I will say this, if you have your own company and it's financed with your own money, maybe you ought to be able to hire the kind of people that you want to hire. But you kind of can't, not if you're going to discriminate against people. This isn't even his own money. This is money for a nonprofit that he's supposed to be responsible when he's running. And this is only an accusation, but this person is swearing this in a deposition, which makes it evidence. The African Development Foundation was created by Congress in 1980 as a board whose members are appointed by the President of the United States to 6-year terms, who in turn appoint a CEO by the board to run day-to-day operations. The board chair was Jack Leslie, a white former staffer who was appointed to the board by Presidents George Bush and Barack Obama. When I see these stories and they talk about this person being black and that person being white, I don't like it at all. I don't think it has anything to do with the quality of your work or your level of your honesty. But in this case, the entire story apparently is about this black person saying they only want to hire black people and this white person getting targeted because they were white, and then the white person became a whistleblower. You got to cover it that way. Atkins bragged about concealing operations from the board, saying, quote, "Then white mother-effers, they don't need to know." Let me do this again. Atkins bragged about concealing operations from the board of directors, saying, quote, "Them white mother-effers, they don't need to know. I don't think I should tell them S." According to the assistant. A junior employee disappeared a few months after she took complaints to the board, and the assistant asked what happened to her. Atkins replied, quote, "I put the white B on a contract, and then the contract ended," the assistant said. Putting someone on a contract? I don't exactly know what that means. If this was The Sopranos, and maybe the crime is at that level, maybe it's not quite yet, I don't know. There seem to be millions of dollars unaccounted for with this organization. If this was The Sopranos or The Godfather maybe, and you put a contract on somebody, that would mean that some kind of threatening or violence could happen to that person. Maybe you pay them a visit and rearrange their furniture, so to speak. That is a real mafia expression. But she made complaints to the board of directors, and all of a sudden, she wasn't there anymore. Whatever happened, happened. The situation was the same under the prior CEO, C.D. Glynn, a former Peace Corps DEI officer and later an Obama political appointee to the Peace Corps who led the agency from 2016 to 2021. Quote, "C.D. Glynn literally said to me that he needed to hire black people," another employee told the Daily Wire, on condition of anonymity. Quote, "Virtually everyone he hired in programs was black. Well, I will say if I was a criminal and I was running a criminal organization, and if I hired certain people of certain genders or skin colors or sexual preferences, and every time I hired those specific people, I had a problem, I had the board finding out what I was up to, maybe I would stop hiring them too. Although I'd like to think that I would just stop running a criminal organization and say, you know what, let's do this legit. But that's just me." In 2021, the agency had to pay a settlement after it laid off a white senior executive without paying her severance or following federal rules, and she alleged it was because of her race. It conducted a reduction in force that was targeted specifically at her and falsely claimed she didn't have the qualifications to shift into another job, even though many of those jobs had actually reported to her. In previous installments in this series, the Daily Wire reported how its agency CFO received payments to his personal bank account from a company to which he steered $1 million of contracts. The agency gave money to African grantees and then instructed them to reroute it to the agency's employees and friends in America, and even pushed a for-profit multi-level marketing scheme run by a board member on poor Africans. That's Herbalife, and that's a whole other story they did on this. Herbalife has been called an illegal Ponzi scheme. It was vindicated as not being an illegal Ponzi scheme. That said, if you're in Africa, maybe you don't need to be part of a multi-level marketing operation. So we can't really comment on Herbalife, but you should not be using your African Development Corporation to promote multi-level marketing, whether it's a Ponzi scheme or not. In a government agency, the job of the general counsel is to ensure that rules and laws are followed. Glynn ensured that the role was either empty or filled with junior lawyers with no experience in government, even though the agency engaged in complex international finance. Well, that's not a good sign, because if you don't have a lawyer that understands what the legal activities are of your organization, then you're deliberately hiding oversight. The board of directors ought to have stepped up and said, okay, no, we're going to appoint someone and you're going to have to accept them. They didn't do that, and maybe they tried to do that. We don't know the whole background story, but yeah, that does not sound right to me. After he departed as CEO in May 2021, there was a brief period in which the agency had no permanent leader, and a traditional general counsel managed to slip through. When Mateo Dunn, a white former high-level Defense Department executive, took the job, he was appalled by how little the African Development Foundation seemed to care about laws and rules. The new general counsel set out to interview employees about conflicts of interest, purchase card abuse, contracting fraud, and a toxic workplace environment. In a matter of days, the evidence started stacking up. He told the acting CEO, Elizabeth Felique, that outside lawyers would have to be brought in to document the full scope of the lawbreaking. Instead, Felique ordered him to stop the investigation, told him to change the preliminary findings, and falsely told the board the probe was complete. He told the Daily Wire Dunn stopped investigating, but sent his preliminary report to the board. The general counsel soon learned that despite nearly uniform agreement that Glynn had been abusive, the organization wasn't getting a fresh start. The board agreed to hire a decades-long friend of Glynn's, Travis Atkins, to replace him. When Atkins entered the office for the first time, Glynn enveloped him in a bear hug. Atkins later testified under oath that he was selected to lead the African Development Foundation without even applying for the job, and that he couldn't recall when or how he managed to be selected. Yeah, I don't know how I got to be head of this organization. Yeah, I'm the new CEO. I don't quite recall. I mean, yes, it was just like a couple of months ago that they started talking to me like, would you like this position? But, I don't remember everything, and it was kind of hazy back then. I was sort of busy. That's not a credible response. As Atkins' start date neared, that's this guy, Dunn prepared to show him the lawbreaking he had found so that Atkins could reform the agency. That would have been Dunn's responsibility as the general counsel. He had to do that. However, it seemed that Atkins already knew, and his first priority was shutting down Dunn's investigation. Within hours of Atkins being sworn in as president and CEO in January 2022, he put Dunn on leave and cut off his access to evidence before he could even speak, according to video. Quote, "You will be on administrative leave the very moment we hang up this call. You will have a box mailed to your home to allow you to send back to us any USADF issued equipment. You are not to contact any of the members of the USADF staff, and again, your access to all of our data and systems will be closed down immediately." Dunn replied, quote, "I had prepared this slide deck to introduce myself and what I'd done at USADF. This conversation obviously went a different way. I guess I have a couple of questions." Quote, "We're not going to do questions and answers," Atkins said. "We're not going to have a back and forth about this." Dunn was never told why he was placed on leave, which Atkins acknowledged was the first step in a discipline process. Internally, the agency sought to build a justification for firing the white lawyer, with Chief of Staff Brandy James compiling a 75-page manifesto that called Dunn adversarial, belittling, calculating, combative, condescending, deceitful, defensive, grimy, sinister, and unwholesome. Just a note to Brandy James, that's excessive and it undercuts your argument. Also, grimy is not effective. Maybe the first 3 or so, and then you stop at that point. Because people can agree to disagree, but when you're so ridiculous with all the adjectives, you have no legitimate argument. The report called Dunn a danger to USADF's mission and staff, but the details made clear that the risk was not to anyone's life, but rather to the livelihoods of law-breaking bureaucrats. The dossier faulted him for his insistence on tying up staff time on investigatory digs. I do like lawyers. I also don't like lawyers. And sometimes lawyers do go too far just to kind of justify themselves inside of an organization. They ask a lot of questions. They create issues that were never there in the first place. Yes, they might be trying to protect the organization, but sometimes they're not. They're just troublemakers. But none of this reads like this lawyer was going too far and going far out of his way to create problems that didn't exist. There were a lot of problems that did exist. The problem was him catching people doing things that they should not be doing. Because in any normal situation, if people really are stealing from an organization like this, nonprofit, private company, whatever it is, if that really is going on, people should be going to jail. And not just jail, prison. The evidence of the attorney's insubordination was that he had investigated apparent spending on luxuries and personal items by top staff when acting CEO Elizabeth Felique said, quote, "I have not given Mateo direction or mandate to investigate credit card fraud." A lawyer does not need direction from the CEO to investigate something that he thinks could be an issue based on what he's seen inside of the organization. As evidence of Dunn, quote, circumventing and breaching USADF protocols, the dossier complained that Dunn notified Glynn that he had not filed years' worth of mandatory Office of Government Ethics conflict of interest forms carrying a $600 penalty, even though Felique told him not to raise the issue. As general counsel, Dunn was the agency's designated ethics officer and required to do so by the government-wide ethics office. Yeah, this is not something where if the corrupt CEO or an honest CEO says, look, don't look into this, don't look into that, don't tell the board of directors, the CEO doesn't own the organization. The board of directors is responsible for what's going on at the organization on a very high level. That's why they have insurance a lot of times, just to be on a board of directors. And sometimes that doesn't even completely cover you on a board of directors. You have to kind of pay attention to what's going on if you're on a board of directors. So a CEO coming in and saying, no, don't look at obvious problems because I didn't tell you to look at those obvious problems is not going to cut it. The fact that these forms would have revealed that the African group had paid money to a group associated with Glynn and refused to file the forms can carry criminal penalties. Atkins went as far as implying that Dunn had threatened to eliminate him, alluding to something, quote, being sent to people regarding the death of government officials, as all of us are government officials. This, it turned out, was a fantastical distortion of Dunn sharing a sentimental quote from a New York governor acknowledging the passing of a former legislator. Then a new comment appeared on the agency's profile on the employer review site Glassdoor that said under, quote, advice to management, DIE. That post was attributed to the general counsel, Dunn. The African Development Foundation sicked 4 different law enforcement agencies on Dunn for making threats to eliminate people. The former Sunday school teaching lawyer said he was framed. Quote, if I was going to do an anonymous post, I would obviously not put my job title in there, he said. Atkins was forthright with the board's chair, Jack Leslie, about what was really going on. He wrote to Leslie that Dunn was placed on leave for his, quote, efforts to damage USADF's reputation via the Office of Inspector General. Dunn conducted an unauthorized, backward-focused investigation that unsettled staff. He then began leveling accusations that USADF senior leadership was interfering with his investigations and general counsel functions. The African Development Foundation never told Dunn what he was being investigated for, or formally moved to fire him, which would require proving that he did something wrong. It simply left him on paid leave indefinitely, violating a law that limits investigative leave to 90 days. After 6 months, in July 2022, he quit to take another job. An agency's top lawyer calling attention to the rampant law-breaking, only for him to be removed from duty, is as remarkable a case of whistleblower retaliation as the government has ever seen. Dunn provided documentation to the Office of Special Counsel, which exists to investigate whistleblower retaliation. But that office closed his file when the employee he'd been working with left her job. He filed a complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, alleging discrimination on the basis of his race and retaliation. In August 2024, an administrative law judge dismissed his case, even though he had an affidavit from a black employee saying that Atkins had told her repeatedly that he did not want any white people working for him. Dunn is now appealing in court. Dunn deposed African Development Foundation staff in the course of that lawsuit. In his sworn testimony, Atkins denied saying he wouldn't hire white people, but also claimed he didn't know how many people worked for him, that he could only remember the names of 2, and that he didn't know what race various employees were. Atkins had told the board that a government-wide human resource office had recommended Mr. Dunn immediately be placed on administrative leave for misconduct and performance. A representative of that office testified it was not true. Atkins denied plotting to remove Dunn as general counsel before he even started as CEO in an effort to spare his friend Glynn and officials like Matthew Zahui, the chief financial officer and a target of the investigation. But discovery in the lawsuit showed that Zahui had written during that time period that, quote, the board and the incoming president would like to explore the possibilities of a do-over on the general counsel hire. When you're doing some potentially shady things, try not to put stuff in writing. Dunn said it has been painful to watch some turn the American Development Foundation into a martyr, seemingly to avoid acknowledging that DOGE's scrutiny was warranted. When no one cared to fix it, those signs were abundant that it was broken. He said he left his job at the Defense Department to come to the African agency, quote, because I wanted to help people, but found that widespread rule breaking was shortchanging both Africans and low-level staff. And taxpayers too, don't leave us out. He went on to say, quote, I think USADF deserved the fate that it received, because if it couldn't be run correctly, then it shouldn't be run at all. If the leaders of that agency couldn't act, and the members of the foreign policy establishment wouldn't act, he said, it's an indictment of the entire system. The people that were involved in this organization, if they were taking money that they were not supposed to be taking, they are in serious trouble, and they are done. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.